Qanta Ahmed is a doctor from Britain, and she's a specialist in sleep disorders. And you may remember that she was on Outsiders here last year, two years ago, when she was one of the first people to speak up about what we were talking about earlier, which was, of course, the whole business to do with obesity and COVID. So we'll chat to Qanta about that as well. But more importantly, she has, as well as being on the front line fighting COVID, she is also the author of a book, In the Land of Invisible Women, which she wrote about her time working and living in Saudi Arabia. She is a proud Muslim, but she is critical of some aspects of Islam. She is also a member of the Committee Combating Contemporary Anti-Semitism at the USC Shoah Foundation and a senior fellow at the Independent Women's Forum. Qanta, it's always great to see you. How are you?
I'm great, Rowan. Great to see you. Good morning, Australia. Thank you for having me.
Well, our pleasure. Now, you wrote in your recent article, a very powerful article, about the erasure of American Jews. Tell us your basic fears and theory there.
So, as you've just seen, there has been a horrendous attempted attack on a synagogue on the Sabbath in Texas, which was, thank God, thwarted. Even though Jewish people were held hostage at that time. And just as that was unfolding, I was reading in Rolling Stone about the new museum in Hollywood, the Academy Museum, which is celebrating Hollywood's history, but fails to include any of the founders of Hollywood that were themselves Jewish emigres fleeing Nazi Germany. There would be no Jews if no Hollywood if there were no Jews escaping from Nazi Hollywood. And here we are, almost 80 years later, after the liberation of the camps by the Allies at the end of the Second World War, where even the mainstay of American culture, Hollywood, does not acknowledge its Jewish origins. This systematic denial of the value Jewish people have provided to the United States, the woke ideology that inverts the Jew as a colonial supremacist is having a real effect. It's promoting anti-Semitism. It's erasing Jews from American culture. It's denying their existence, their contribution. It's denying the rights of Israel to exist. It's aiming for the erasure of the Jewish state, and it's being conveyed very aggressively by woke, neoliberal, neo-Orthodox ideology, which is extremely frightening. So when we see a synagogue under siege, held hostage by a jihadist terrorist in Texas, and the FBI at the end says, we're not sure if it was anti-Semitism, though they quickly walked that back. And then they say, we can't connect the dots with these lone wolves. The writing is on the wall. Our culture is erasing the value and place of Jews. Add to that the pandemic that you just referred to. The pandemic has seen a tsunami of digital anti-Semitism growing at rates that we've never seen before in history. So it's very frightening to me as an American and as a Muslim woman committed to fighting jihadist ideology.
So,
James.
Dr. Ahmed, tell us a bit more about this attack in Texas on that synagogue, because we saw some pretty disgraceful behavior. Not just the FBI did the whole sort of, oh, well, we don't really know what happened here. We may never know what motivated this attack. Not only did immigration officials allow this person in to the country where he then committed this attack, but also Joe Biden seemed to also say, well, you know, we're not sure really kind of anything can happen here. My question to you is, how does that be allowed at the highest levels of American officialdom? But also, is that going to have some effect on Jewish voting patterns in the United States, which have been largely going towards Democrats? Are they starting to say, well, you know what, maybe the Democrats aren't exactly the friends we thought they were in all of this?
So very complex questions and legitimate questions. I'm not privy to the internal developments in the investigation, but clearly this person from Britain was under the surveillance of British intelligence. We know that in Britain, from where I originate, there are ghetto communities that have a propensity for being radicalized and being sympathetic with jihadist ideology. He was quoting an iconic female jihadist that has taken on a larger-than-life personality since she's been federally imprisoned for a crime where she attempted to murder American officers in Afghanistan. And we have a very peculiar situation with immigration in the United States at the moment, with a southern border that is not fully governed, which is fairly open. I think today they apprehended some individuals from Syria entering the southern border,
Right.
though this man came legally through New York. Whether it affects voting patterns, great question. One of my grave concerns is that much of American Jewry, many of the American Jewish community do not understand the acceleration of anti-Semitism inside America. They do not have deep relationships with Israel. Another couple of generations, and this could become a very different United States, perhaps with not empathy with Israel, maybe no interest or possibly antipathy towards Israel, because younger generations are not connected to Judaism and not connected to Israel. I think that's a concern. And in terms of the polarization in the United States between Democrats and Republicans, nowadays in our elections, people are often voting against the candidate rather than in favor of a candidate. But this country in 1 year has swung so extremely to the left from our previous leadership under President Trump that ordinary Americans are really reeling. And we are facing inflation. Gasoline, last night I filled in my tank, was almost $5 a gallon. That's very expensive for the United States. We have inflation at over 7%. We have a labor market that doesn't want to come to work, even though we think we have 10 million jobs that are empty. It's a very unsettling, unpredictable time in the United States.
Rita.
Talking about that extreme swing to the left, Ilhan Omar has an Islamophobia bill that's causing alarm amongst many. What are your thoughts on that bill, and will it effectively silence legitimate criticism of Islamist action?
So, Rita, fantastic question. Indeed, she did sponsor a bill on Islamophobia, and I understand it's not been confirmed or ratified in the Senate at the moment. One of the things that's very concerning, any form of formalizing Islamophobia, which, as you know, is a political and judicial shield for Islamists, more than protecting a Muslim woman like me from some kind of action of hatred. In the United States, in Australia, and Britain, we have excellent laws preventing hate crimes against any member of any group. So we don't need additional laws. A bill in Islamophobia in the United States would be to try and shut down any criticism of an Islamist organ, publication, entity, sympathizer that would really silence the pluralist, moderate Muslims. That's what it would aim to do. And in America, we don't really understand Islamophobia amongst the ordinary people. And her argument will be, well, there was created by President Trump a State Department envoy for the monitoring of contemporary anti-Semitism. And there is an attempt to morally make equivalent anti-Semitism with Islamophobia. There is no equivalence. Anti-Semitism is the only hate that has ended up in lethal genocide, which signifies the leading crime against humanity in history. I hope to God mankind never sees a crime of that scale again, ever. Anti-Semitism is with genocidal intent in words, in sympathies, in actions. Islamophobia is a modern construct. It actually was probably launched in the modern world by Ayatollah Khomeini, who issued a death sentence on Salman Rushdie for the satanic verses. And then, that was the beginning of this was a violation against Islam, and this is punishable by death. That was the Ayatollah Khomeini's ideology. We know in the history of Islam, the Prophet of Islam himself welcomed critics. He laughed at his critics. He welcomed critics. That was not any way preventing him from observing or preaching. And ordinary Muslims, we are taught, if anyone criticizes us, if anyone is unkind to us, we just bid them peace and move along. There's no limitation in our ability to practice our religion or belief if there is Islamophobia around us. If there's anti-Muslim xenophobia, we have laws in our democracy to prosecute that. So Ilhan Omar is moving forward in a direction that would greatly empower Islamists. That includes Islamist sympathizing medias, patrons of Islamism, countries like Turkey, perhaps countries like Qatar. It would make it very difficult to criticize them. But so far, the Senate has not approved that bill, to my knowledge.
Dr. Qanta, Ahmed, it's always so great to talk to you and to have you on the show. I urge people to follow you on Twitter @Misdiagnosis and to read your writings. You always write so well. You've written in The Spectator, you've written elsewhere. Great to see you, Qanta, and thank you so much for coming on Outsiders. It's Sunday morning here, Saturday night in New York. Thanks so much for giving us your time, and it's great to see you.
Thanks so much for having me. Wonderful to see you again. I'd love to come back and we can speak about COVID next time.
We want to see you. We want to see you out here.